Donald Trump's open admiration for Vladimir Putin has long been a point of contention. This affinity has come into sharp focus against the backdrop of the ongoing war in Ukraine. Trump's public break with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, a former ally, underscores the depth of his pro-Russia stance. Trump's claims that security guarantees for Ukraine are unnecessary because Putin wouldn't break them have alarmed many. His praise for Putin's character and reminiscing about weathering the Russia hoax together further solidify this perception. This pro-Russia position has divided the Republican Party. On one side are the National Conservatives, a group increasingly aligned with Trump's worldview. They view his stance as a strategic calculation, reflecting a perceived reluctance among American voters to continue funding Ukraine's war effort indefinitely. This faction tends to rationalize Russia's aggression and opposes continued U.S. support for Ukraine. On the other side of the divide are the pro-Ukraine conservatives. This group, once dominant within the GOP, finds itself increasingly marginalized. While dismayed by Trump's stance, they often avoid directly criticizing him. Instead, they point fingers at Zelensky, blaming him for failing to appease Trump and maintain his favor. The Republican Party is now grappling with these two opposing forces. Trump's pro-Russia position, once a fringe view within the party, has gained significant traction. This divide within the GOP has far-reaching implications for U.S. foreign policy and the future of American support for Ukraine. Trump supporters have levied a range of criticisms against Zelensky, often focusing on seemingly superficial issues. One frequent criticism revolves around Zelensky's choice of attire. They argue that his decision not to wear a tie during meetings with international leaders, including Trump, was a grave misstep that contributed to the current policy reversal. Beyond attire, Trump supporters also fault Zelensky for publicly challenging Trump's pro-Russia claims. They argue that Zelensky should have addressed these disagreements privately, suggesting that open dissent only served to antagonize Trump. This perspective reflects a broader belief that maintaining Trump's favor, even at the expense of truth or principle, was paramount. These criticisms of Zelensky, while seemingly trivial to some, reveal a deeper dynamic at play. By focusing on superficialities and blaming Zelensky for failing to appease Trump, this faction avoids grappling with the more uncomfortable reality of Trump's deeply held pro-Russia sentiments. This tendency to deflect blame away from Trump and onto Zelensky highlights the challenges faced by those within the Republican Party who still support Ukraine. It underscores the extent to which Trump's influence continues to shape the GOP's foreign policy outlook, even as the party grapples with internal divisions. Trump's return to the White House for a second term has ushered in a new era in Republican foreign policy. Unlike his first term, where internal resistance and bureaucratic inertia often slowed down his policy implementation, Trump now enjoys a level of unchecked power that allows him to swiftly enact his agenda. This shift is glaringly evident in his approach to Ukraine. Trump has wasted no time in implementing pro-Russia policies, including cutting off military aid to Ukraine. He has openly blamed Ukraine for the war, echoing Russian propaganda, and even accused Zelensky of being a dictator. These actions stand in stark contrast to his earlier pronouncements of support for Ukraine, highlighting the dramatic shift in his posture. This more assertive approach reflects not only Trump's consolidation of power within the Republican Party, but also the growing influence of the national conservative faction that supports his pro-Russia stance. With fewer constraints on his authority, Trump has been able to enact policies that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. The consequences of Trump's unchecked power and pro-Russia policies are already being felt both domestically and internationally. The Republican Party is increasingly divided, and America's global standing as a reliable ally has been called into question. The Republican Party finds itself at a crossroads. Trump's pro-Russia stance and his assertive actions in his second term have exposed and exacerbated existing divisions within the GOP. The future direction of Republican foreign policy remains uncertain, with two main camps vying for influence. On one hand, the National Conservatives, emboldened by Trump's return to power, are pushing for a more isolationist approach to foreign policy. They view continued support for Ukraine as a costly entanglement and advocate for prioritizing American interests above all else. This faction's worldview aligns closely with Trump's and has gained considerable traction within the party. On the other hand, Some Republicans, though increasingly marginalized, remain committed to a more traditional view of American global leadership. They see Russia's actions in Ukraine as a threat to international order, and believe that the U.S. has a moral obligation to support democracies under threat. This camp faces an uphill battle in the current political climate. The future of Republican foreign policy hinges on which of these factions ultimately prevails. Will the GOP continue down the path of Trumpian isolationism and pro-Russia appeasement? Or will a resurgence of traditional conservative values steer the party back towards a more assertive and principled foreign policy stance? The answer to this question has profound implications for the United States and its role in the world.